I can fix this, the lowly Omega healer said, and the wounded Alpha stared. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into today's story. In the heart of the dense wolfwood forest, under the pale moonlight, a wounded stranger lay crumpled on the ground, his body battered, blood staining the earth beneath him. The wolves of the pack had long abandoned the idea of offering help, seeing him as a lost cause. Yet there she was, a girl of humble origins, an Omega with no standing in the pack. Lyra. She had lived a life of rejection, her powers as a healer dismissed as unimportant. Despite being an Omega, a position reserved for the weak in her world, she had the gift of healing. A gift that had never been appreciated by anyone except for her grandmother. Lyra was used to the whispers, the stares, the way people would look at her with pity or contempt. She had learned to live in the shadows, unnoticed, unimportant. But tonight, she found herself facing something completely unexpected. She had heard the cries, the desperate sounds of someone in pain, and despite her own fear, she could not ignore it. She followed the sounds to the edge of the forest, where she found him, this man barely alive with eyes that were both wild and pleading. His clothes were torn, his body battered by some unknown attack, but there was something about him that drew her in. As she knelt beside him, her heart raced. She had never treated an alpha before, let alone one in such a state. But she knew what she had to do. Lyra gently placed her hands on his wound, feeling the raw, pulsing energy beneath her fingertips. She concentrated, letting her healing powers flow through her, knowing that this could be her only chance to prove that she was more than just an invisible Omega. The man groaned, his body twitching under her touch, but his eyes remained closed, lost in the haze of pain. Lyra whispered softly to him, I can fix this. It was a promise, more to herself than to him, but as the words left her lips, she felt a strange shift in the air. It wasn't just the wound she was healing. It was something deeper, something that she couldn't understand. For a moment everything seemed to freeze. The forest around them fell silent, as if holding its breath. Then as the last of his wounds healed, the man's eyes fluttered open, and he stared at her, not with confusion or gratitude, but with a depth that made her heart skip a beat. You, he murmured, his voice rough. You saved me. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure why she had expected anything else, but there was something about the way he looked at her that sent a shiver down her spine. He was no ordinary man. His eyes, a piercing silver, glowed with a strange intensity, and for a moment, she felt as though she were staring into the eyes of something ancient, something far more powerful than she had ever imagined. Before she could speak, he pushed himself up, wincing from the pain, and she saw the marks of a great warrior, an alpha, perhaps even a king. But it wasn't until he spoke again that the truth of who he was hit her. I am Kael, Alpha King of the Shadowfang pack, he said, his voice stronger now, filled with an authority that made the air around them tremble. Lyra stared at him in shock. She had no idea who he was. Only that she had healed him, something that seemed impossible for someone like her. The Alpha King, she whispered. Her mind raced, trying to process the revelation. How could someone like her, an Omega, have helped someone so powerful? Kael looked at her with a mix of awe and something else, something that felt almost like a bond, a connection that neither of them fully understood. He stood up, steadying himself, and met her gaze. You are no ordinary Omega, he said quietly. You are my mate. The words hit Lyra like a bolt of lightning, and for a moment, everything around her seemed to spin. The Alpha King had just claimed her, an Omega, the very lowest of their kind. She didn't know what to think, what to say. All she knew was that her life had just changed in ways she could never have imagined. I don't understand, she stammered, her heart pounding in her chest. Kael smiled, a small, knowing smile that seemed to hold all the secrets of the world. You will in time. But for now let me take you home. And with that, their fates were sealed. As the moon rose higher in the sky, casting its soft light over the forest, Lyra stood frozen in place. The Alpha King, Kael, stood in front of her. His piercing silver eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. She had never felt so exposed in her life. Yet there was something strangely comforting about his presence. Her heart raced as she tried to process the words he had just spoken. "You are my mate," he had said, and although she had no idea what that truly meant, she knew it wasn't something easily dismissed. Kael took a step toward her, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over the ground. Despite his injuries, he moved with a fluid grace that reminded her of the powerful alpha he was. She had healed him, but now it seemed as though the tables had turned, and he was the one who held the power. "I don't understand," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. "How can I be your mate? I'm just an Omega, a healer, nothing more." Kael smiled softly, a glimmer of something almost affectionate in his eyes. "You are more than you know, Lyra. You healed me, something no one else could do. That alone makes you different. You are my fated mate, whether you believe it or not." Lyra took a step back, her mind racing. She had always been told that Omegas were weak, unworthy of the attention of an alpha, let alone the Alpha King himself. She was nothing more than a healer, someone to be looked down upon, not someone worthy of being by his side. "I don't deserve this," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm not strong like you. I don't have the power or the status to be your mate." Kael's expression softened as he reached out, gently taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, grounding, and despite her initial hesitation, she found herself not pulling away. "You don't need to be strong, Lyra. You have something more powerful than strength. You have a heart that heals, and that is all I need." His words, though simple, felt like a balm to her wounded soul. She had always believed she was insignificant, that her life was worth little more than the healing she could provide. But now, here was the most powerful man in the land, telling her that she had something of value, something that he needed. The weight of his words settled over her, and for the first time in her life she felt seen. "I don't know what this means," Lyra said, still struggling to understand. "But I can't turn my back on you. I'll stay, but I can't promise anything." Kael nodded, his grip on her hand tightening ever so slightly. "That's all I ask. Take your time. But know this, Lyra, you are not just an Omega. You are my mate, and that means something more than anything else." They stood there in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft rustling of the leaves in the breeze. Lyra felt a strange sense of peace wash over her, despite the storm of emotions swirling within her. This was the beginning of something she had never expected, and as much as she wanted to deny it, she could feel the pull between them, the connection that she couldn't ignore, no matter how hard she tried. Kael stepped back, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'll take you to my pack," he said. "You'll be safe there. No one will hurt you." Lyra nodded, though doubt still lingered in her mind. She had spent her entire life on the outskirts, rejected and forgotten by her pack. But now she was about to enter a world of power and politics, a world she had never known. Kael led her through the forest, his hand never leaving hers. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Lyra felt a sense of hope. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life had just changed forever. The Alpha King had claimed her, and whether she was ready or not, her journey was just beginning. The journey to Kael's pack was quiet, yet Lyra's mind raced with questions she could not find answers to. She walked beside him through the dense woods, the soft crunch of leaves beneath their feet the only sound breaking the stillness of the night. Kael, though strong and imposing, walked at a pace that matched hers, never once pulling ahead. His hand, warm and steady, held hers firmly, as though he feared she might slip away. But Lyra was conflicted. The weight of his words still hung heavily in her heart. "You are my mate," he had said. How could she, an Omega healer, ever truly belong to someone so powerful? How could someone like her, who had spent her entire life in the shadows, now stand beside the Alpha King of Shadowfang? She had always believed her purpose was to heal and be forgotten, never to be seen as worthy of anything more. But now, Kael was offering her something she couldn't fathom, something she wasn't sure she could accept. They reached the edge of the forest, where the trees parted to reveal a sprawling valley. In the distance, the towering walls of Shadowfang's castle loomed, a fortress made of dark stone that seemed to reach for the sky. The scent of the pack, wild, untamed, and full of power, filled the air, and Lyra couldn't help but shiver. This was a world unlike any she had ever known. As they walked toward the castle, Lyra felt a sense of awe but also fear. What awaited her inside those walls? What would the pack think of her, an Omega, walking beside their Alpha King as though she belonged? "You will be safe here," Kael said, his voice breaking through her thoughts. She looked up at him, trying to find comfort in his words, but the doubt remained. How could she ever fit into a world of power, where she had always been considered weak? As they entered the castle grounds, Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. The Alpha King's home was grand, filled with the scent of old stone and the rich, earthy tones of the pack. Kael's presence seemed to command the very air around them, and the pack members who passed them lowered their eyes in respect. Lyra, however, couldn't shake the feeling that she was out of place, like an intruder in a world that wasn't meant for her. The halls of the castle were decorated with banners and tapestries depicting battles won, victories celebrated, and a legacy of power. She had never seen anything like it. As they walked deeper into the castle, Lyra felt the weight of the history surrounding her. "This is where you belong now," Kael said, his tone soft but filled with certainty. Lyra wanted to argue, to say that she didn't belong here, that she had always been an outsider. But the look in Kael's eyes silenced her. There was something in him, something undeniable, that made her want to believe him. They reached a large chamber, its walls lined with intricate carvings that told the story of Shadowfang's rise to power. In the center of the room a massive throne sat, its cold stone surface reflecting the dim light of the torches that lined the walls. Kael turned to her, his eyes searching hers. "This is the heart of my pack, Lyra," he said, his voice low and steady. "And you will be at my side." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. He wasn't just claiming her as his mate. He was giving her a place beside him, in a world where she had always been invisible. It was more than she had ever imagined, more than she had ever thought possible. But was she ready for this? Was she ready to step into a world of power and danger? A world where her place was not at the bottom, but beside the most powerful alpha in the land? "I don't know if I'm ready," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Kael's expression softened, and he stepped closer to her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to be ready," he said. "We'll take it one step at a time together." His words, simple yet profound, gave her a sense of calm she hadn't expected. For the first time Lyra felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find her place here, in a world where she had never belonged. The future was uncertain, and the challenges ahead were great, but for the first time in her life, Lyra felt as though she had something to fight for. As Kael led her further into the heart of Shadowfang, she knew that whatever came next, she would face it with him by her side. The following days in Shadowfang's castle were a whirlwind for Lyra, the enormity of her new life settling heavily on her shoulders. She had never imagined that she would be here, standing side by side with Kael, the Alpha King, surrounded by the pack that revered him. The castle, though breathtaking, felt like a prison to her, its high stone walls and vast, echoing chambers trapping her in a world she had never known. Everywhere she looked, there were whispers and sideways glances, pack members studying her as if she were some kind of puzzle they had yet to solve. Lyra knew she was different, but now she felt it more than ever. The Omega healer, once dismissed and ignored, was now the mate of the Alpha King. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the power and attention that came with such a title, but Kael had made it clear that this was her place now. He never left her side, always guiding her, always protecting her, but the doubt still lingered in her heart. Was she truly worthy of this life? One afternoon, as Lyra walked through the castle gardens, the weight of the stairs from the pack weighed on her, the silence around her deafening. She had always been used to the quiet, the solitude of her old life, but now the silence felt different. The air was thick with expectations, and she could feel the pack's judgment, their eyes following her every move. It made her want to run, to hide away in the small cottage she had once called home, but she knew that was no longer an option. This was her life now. "Are you all right?" Kael's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to find him standing just behind her, his expression soft, yet filled with concern. His presence, strong and comforting, had become her anchor in this storm of emotions. "I don't belong here," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know how to be what you need me to be. Kael stepped forward, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. You don't need to be anything you're not, Lyra. You are enough just as you are. I chose you for a reason. Lyra looked up at him, her heart aching with the intensity of his gaze. He believed in her, but she wasn't sure she believed in herself. But I'm just an Omega, she said, her voice trembling. How can I be enough for you, for your pack? Kael's lips curled into a small smile, and he reached up to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Being an Omega doesn't make you any less worthy. In fact, it makes you stronger, more resilient. You have a gift that no one else can offer. You healed me when no one else could. That is what makes you extraordinary, Lyra. The sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter, but the doubt still lingered. She had always felt insignificant, like a small, invisible part of the world. But here, surrounded by power and strength, she felt anything but powerful. Kael seemed to sense her unease and gently guided her to sit on a stone bench in the garden. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, he said softly. The pack will come to see you for who you truly are. They will respect you just as I do. Lyra looked around at the castle, at the people who now seemed like strangers to her. How could they ever accept her, someone who had always been seen as weak? I don't know if I can do this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to be strong enough for all of this. Kael sat beside her, his presence solid and comforting. You don't have to do it alone. I'll be here every step of the way. Together we will face whatever comes. And you will see, Lyra, that you are stronger than you think. The warmth of his words wrapped around her like a blanket, and for the first time since coming to Shadowfang, Lyra felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this. Maybe she didn't have to be afraid of her place here, of the power that came with being Kael's mate. Maybe, for the first time in her life, she could embrace who she was and the life that awaited her. As Kael stood up, offering her his hand, Lyra took it without hesitation, the doubts in her heart slowly fading away. Together they walked back into the castle, her heart a little lighter than before, the weight of her new reality still heavy, but no longer as overwhelming as it had been. She was ready to face whatever came next, as long as Kael was by her side. As the days passed, Lyra slowly adjusted to her new life in the Shadowfang castle, though the feeling of being out of place never fully left her. The pack members, while respectful, still treated her with a mix of curiosity and caution. She could feel the weight of their expectations, but Kael's presence was a constant comfort. He was always near, guiding her through the unfamiliar world. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was just a small part of a much larger, more dangerous game. Despite her doubts, Kael had made it clear that she was to be by his side. And as the Alpha King, his word was law. He had shown her a world of power and strength, but it was a world she had never imagined for herself. The weight of the pack's history and Kael's own legacy pressed down on her, and though she tried to keep up, she often felt overwhelmed. One afternoon, as she sat in the grand hall of the castle, Lyra found herself lost in thought. The tapestries on the walls told the story of Shadowfang's rise to power. Battles fought, enemies defeated, and legacies forged. She was surrounded by a history that felt as though it didn't belong to her. You seem distant, Kael's voice interrupted her thoughts, and she looked up to find him standing in the doorway, watching her with a concerned expression. He had a way of seeing through her walls, as if he could read her thoughts without her speaking a word. I'm just thinking, she said, offering him a small smile. About what? He asked, crossing the room to sit beside her. His hand rested gently on hers, and for a moment, she felt a warmth spread through her, calming the storm inside her. About everything, Lyra confessed. About this place, about you, about what it all means. I never imagined my life would be like this. I never thought I'd be here with you. Kael's eyes softened and he squeezed her hand. You belong here, Lyra. More than anyone else ever could. You are the heart of this pack, whether you realize it or not. She turned to face him, searching his eyes for any sign of doubt, but all she saw was sincerity. He truly believed in her in a way no one else ever had. I don't feel like I belong, she whispered, her voice shaky. I'm just an Omega. I don't have the power or the strength that the rest of your pack does. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do here. Kael's smile was gentle but full of conviction. You don't need to have power or strength, Lyra. You have something more valuable. Your heart, your compassion, your ability to heal. That is what makes you special. And that is why you are my mate. His words, though comforting, only seemed to add to the weight she already carried. She had never asked for this power, this attention, and now she was being thrust into a world where she was expected to stand beside the most powerful man in the land. But what if I'm not enough? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I fail? Kael leaned in, his gaze intense but full of tenderness. You will never fail, Lyra. Not with me by your side. I will always be here to guide you, to protect you. Together we will face everything that comes. And no matter what happens, you are enough. You always have been. His words felt like a balm to her soul, soothing the fears and insecurities that had plagued her since the moment she arrived. She had always doubted herself, always believed she was nothing more than a healer, someone to be used and discarded. But Kael was offering her something different. He was offering her a place by his side, a place where she could be more than just an Omega. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of this life. She leaned into Kael's embrace, finding comfort in his warmth. Thank you, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion, for believing in me. Kael kissed her forehead gently, his touch sending a wave of calm through her. You don't need to thank me. I've always believed in you. You just needed to believe in yourself. As they sat there together, Lyra felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. With Kael by her side, she knew she could overcome anything. The journey ahead would be difficult, but it was a journey she would face with him, and that was all that mattered. Days turned into weeks, and Lyra's life in Shadowfang's castle began to settle into a rhythm, though her mind was never fully at ease. The weight of her position as the mate of the Alpha King lingered heavily on her, and the eyes of the pack were always on her. They watched her every move, their curiosity and skepticism palpable. Lyra had grown accustomed to being overlooked, to being ignored or dismissed, but now with Kael at her side, she was under constant scrutiny. At times it felt as if the walls of the castle were closing in on her, the stares of the pack members like silent chains binding her to a destiny she wasn't sure she was ready for. But despite the overwhelming nature of it all, Kael was always there, a constant source of reassurance. He had never wavered in his belief in her, even when she doubted herself. His presence was a comfort, and his support made the burden of her new life bearable. One evening, after another long day filled with tense interactions with the pack, Lyra found herself walking alone in the castle's gardens. The night air was cool, the scent of pine and fresh earth filling her lungs as she wandered through the flower beds. The quiet solitude of the gardens was a welcome escape from the heavy atmosphere of the castle. She needed this time to think, to breathe without the weight of expectations pressing down on her. You look like you could use some company, Kael's voice interrupted her thoughts, and she turned to find him standing at the entrance to the garden, his gaze steady and full of warmth. He was always so perceptive, always knowing when she needed him most. I didn't mean to worry you, Lyra said, offering him a small smile as he walked toward her. I just needed a moment. Kael stopped in front of her, his expression softening. You don't have to explain yourself to me, Lyra, he said gently. I know how hard this must be for you. It's not easy being thrust into this world, but you don't have to do it alone. Lyra met his eyes, feeling the sincerity of his words deep in her chest. She had been so consumed by doubt, so focused on the fear of not being enough, that she hadn't stopped to appreciate the support Kael offered. He didn't expect her to be perfect. He didn't expect her to fit into some idealized role. He accepted her for who she was, flaws and all. I just feel so out of place, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not like them, Kael. I don't have their strength, their power. I'm just an Omega, and I don't know if I can live up to everything they expect from me. Kael stepped closer, his hand reaching out to gently lift her chin, making her look at him. You are stronger than you think, he said, his voice firm with conviction. You have a strength that comes from within, Lyra. A strength that is more powerful than any physical power the pack could have. You have the ability to heal, to bring peace where there is conflict. That is a gift that no one else has. That is why you are here by my side. His words washed over her like a wave, pushing back the doubts that had taken root in her heart. She had never seen her own healing abilities as anything special, but Kael was right. They were a gift, something unique to her. Something that made her valuable in ways she hadn't understood before. I'm scared, she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. What if I'm not enough? What if I fail the pack? Kael's expression softened, and he took both of her hands in his. You will never fail me, he said, his voice steady. You are my mate, Lyra, and I believe in you. No matter what happens, I will be by your side, every step of the way. Lyra felt her heart swell with emotion as she looked up at him. In that moment, she realized that she didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need to be perfect. She only needed to be herself, to trust in her own strength and the love that Kael had for her. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice full of gratitude. Kael smiled and pulled her into a gentle embrace, holding her close as if he could protect her from all the doubts and fears that had plagued her. You don't need to thank me, he whispered into her hair. I'm just here to help you see how strong you truly are. As they stood there in the garden, wrapped in each other's arms, Lyra felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. She still didn't know what the future held, but with Kael by her side, she felt like she could face anything. For the first time since arriving at Shadowfang, she felt like she truly belonged, not because of her strength or her power, but because Kael believed in her, and that belief was enough to carry her forward. As the weeks passed, Lyra's place in Shadowfang Castle began to solidify, though the doubts that lingered in her heart never fully disappeared. Kael had been right. She didn't need to have all the answers, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was still an outsider in a world that was so unfamiliar to her. The pack was still wary of her, the Omega who had somehow earned the Alpha King's favor, but they watched her with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Every day she faced the challenge of proving herself, not just to the pack but to herself. Kael, however, remained a steady presence, his unwavering belief in her a constant source of strength. He never asked for anything more than what she was willing to give, but still, she felt the pressure of the expectations placed upon her. One evening, as they sat in the castle's grand hall after a long day of dealing with pack matters, Lyra's mind wandered to the future. Kael had been busy with the affairs of his pack, and she had been left to her thoughts, trying to come to terms with her new role as his mate. The weight of her responsibilities pressed down on her, and she couldn't help but wonder if she was really cut out for this life. You seem distant, Kael said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. He sat beside her, his warm presence a comfort. She hadn't even noticed how tense she had become, but now with him so close, the worry seemed to ebb away just a little. I'm fine, she replied quickly, though she knew he could see right through her. Kael didn't say anything at first. Instead, he just watched her, his eyes filled with understanding. After a moment he spoke again, his voice soft but firm. You don't have to hide from me, Lyra. I know what you're feeling. I can see the weight on your shoulders. But you're not alone in this. Not anymore. She looked at him, his sincerity taking her by surprise. I don't know if I can do this, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not like you, Kael. I don't have the strength to lead, to command. I'm just an Omega. I'm not made for this kind of life. Kael reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. You're stronger than you think, he said, his voice filled with conviction. You've already proven that. You healed me when no one else could. You have a strength inside of you that no one can take away. Lyra shook her head, not fully convinced. That's not the same. Healing is what I know, but leading the pack, standing by your side. I don't know if I can be what you need. Kael's expression softened, and he gently cupped her face in his hands, lifting her chin so that their eyes met. What I need, Lyra, is you. Not the powerful healer, not the perfect mate, just you. You've always been enough, and you always will be. His words, simple yet profound, broke through the walls she had built around herself. She had spent so much time trying to be something she wasn't, trying to live up to an impossible standard, that she hadn't realized that Kael loved her for exactly who she was. She wasn't just the Omega healer. She wasn't just a tool to be used. She was his mate, and that meant more to him than anything else. I've never felt like I belonged anywhere, Lyra said softly, the weight of her past creeping into her words. I was always the one who was overlooked, the one who didn't matter. And now, here I am, expected to take a place beside the Alpha King. I don't know how to make sense of it. Kael's thumb gently brushed her cheek as he spoke, his voice calm and steady. You belong with me, Lyra. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. I don't expect you to change. I don't need you to be something you're not. Just be who you are, and that will be enough. His words, so full of love and understanding, reached deep into her heart. For the first time in her life, she felt like she didn't have to be anyone else. She didn't have to hide or pretend. She could be herself with all her flaws and imperfections, and that was enough. The realization was both freeing and terrifying. But as she looked into Kael's eyes, she knew that she wasn't alone in this journey. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. And for the first time in a long while, Lyra felt the weight on her shoulders lift, replaced by the warmth of Kael's love and support. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Kael smiled, his hand resting gently on hers. You don't need to thank me, Lyra. I'm here for you always. They sat together in the quiet of the grand hall, the world outside fading into the background as Lyra allowed herself to simply be. She was still uncertain about the future, still unsure of how she would fit into this powerful new world. But she knew one thing for sure. She didn't have to do it alone. Kael would be there by her side every step of the way. Days passed, and Lyra's life in Shadowfang's castle began to feel more familiar, though the weight of being the Alpha King's mate was still a constant presence. She had learned to navigate the halls of the grand castle, to interact with the pack members who now looked to her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Though Kael had been nothing but supportive, she still felt the pressure to prove herself, to show that she was worthy of the position by his side. But no matter how much she tried to convince herself that she was ready, self-doubt always seemed to linger at the edges of her mind. One evening as she wandered through the castle's library, trying to escape the weight of the day, she came across a scroll that caught her eye. It was an ancient document detailing the history of Shadowfang, its rise to power, and the legacy of the kings who had ruled before Kael. The more she read, the more she realized just how much responsibility Kael had inherited, how much was expected of him, not just as a king, but as a leader, a protector, and a symbol of strength for his pack. And yet, despite all that, he still made time for her, for their relationship. He never made her feel like she was a burden or a weakness. Instead, he always reminded her that she was his equal, that her value was in who she was, not in what she could do for him. Lyra sighed, closing the scroll with a soft rustle. She didn't want to let the weight of the past control her, but it was hard to escape the feeling that the legacy of the Alpha Kings, the history that had been built over centuries, was too much for her to carry. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't a queen. She was an Omega, a healer, someone who had spent her life hidden in the shadows. What could she possibly bring to the table? Just then, the sound of footsteps approaching broke her from her thoughts, and she turned to find Kael standing in the doorway. His presence was always like a beacon, grounding her, reminding her that she wasn't alone. He stepped inside, his eyes soft as they met hers. I thought I'd find you here, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. You've been distant lately, he continued, his voice gentle but firm. What's on your mind? Lyra hesitated for a moment, the words she had been holding back threatening to spill over. I've been reading about the history of Shadowfang, she said quietly. About the kings who came before you. About the responsibility you carry. I don't know if I can ever be what you need, Kael. I don't know if I can live up to everything that's expected of me. Kael crossed the room and sat beside her, his presence comforting and unwavering. Lyra, he said softly, taking her hand in his. You don't have to live up to anything or anyone. You don't have to be anyone but yourself. She shook her head, her heart heavy. But I don't feel like I belong here. I don't have the strength, the power, the status that the others do. I've spent my whole life as an outsider, and now I'm supposed to stand by your side, in this world of power and politics, and I don't know if I can handle it. Kael's gaze never wavered as he spoke. You don't need to have strength, Lyra. You have something far more powerful. Compassion, healing, and the ability to bring people together. That's what this pack needs. That's what I need. Lyra looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. He believed in her in a way no one else ever had, and for the first time she allowed herself to believe in herself too. "I've always felt like I didn't fit in," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But with you I feel like I might have a place, even if I don't know what that looks like yet." Kael smiled, his thumb gently brushing over her knuckles. "You have a place, Lyra. Right here with me. That's all that matters." His words wrapped around her like a warm embrace, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the fear that had held her back began to fade. Kael had chosen her not because of her power or her status, but because of who she was. And in that moment, Lyra knew that she didn't need to be anything more than that. She didn't need to be the perfect mate or the perfect leader. She just needed to be herself. "Thank you, Kael," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you for believing in me." Kael leaned in, his forehead resting gently against hers. "You don't have to thank me, Lyra. I've always known your worth. It was just a matter of you seeing it for yourself." The castle, with its towering walls and echoes of the past, no longer felt like a prison. It was a place of possibility, of new beginnings. And as Lyra sat there with Kael by her side, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She didn't know what the future held, but with Kael, she was ready to face it. Together they would build their future one step at a time. As the sun rose over Shadowfang, casting a warm glow across the castle's towering walls, Lyra stood at the balcony overlooking the pack's land. The cool breeze ruffled her hair as she took in the vast landscape before her, the rolling hills and dense forests stretching far beyond what her eyes could see. It was a breathtaking view. But it was more than just the scenery that captured her attention. It was the sense of purpose she now felt deep within her soul. The doubts that had plagued her for so long had finally begun to fade, replaced by a newfound strength she never thought possible. She wasn't just the Omega healer anymore. She was Kael's mate, the heart of his pack, and she had a place in this world. A place that she had earned not by power or status but by simply being herself. Kael stood beside her, his presence as steady and reassuring as always. His hand brushed against hers, and she turned to him with a soft smile. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low and filled with quiet confidence. Lyra nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. She had come so far from the uncertain, fearful woman who had first stepped into this world. She was no longer just a healer in the shadows. She was a force in her own right. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady, with no trace of the doubt that had once held her back. Kael smiled, his silver eyes glinting with pride. He reached for her hand, gently pulling her toward him. "Together we will lead this pack," he said, his words firm, yet filled with a warmth that made Lyra feel as though nothing could stand in their way. As they walked through the castle's grand halls, Lyra couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging she had never known before. The pack's members nodded in respect as they passed, and for the first time, Lyra didn't feel like an outsider. She had found her place among them, not through force but through kindness, strength, and love. As they reached the great hall, Kael turned to her, his hand still holding hers. "You are my mate," he said, his voice carrying the weight of all the years of uncertainty and fear that had led them here. "You are everything I need and more. Together, we will build a future that is worthy of this pack." Lyra's heart soared at his words, and she squeezed his hand in return. She had never imagined that she would stand beside someone like Kael, someone so powerful, yet so kind. But here they were, and she knew in that moment that they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With Kael by her side, she felt unstoppable. She was no longer just the healer, no longer just the Omega. She was his equal, his mate, and the future of Shadowfang. As the pack gathered in the great hall, ready to witness the union of their Alpha King and his mate, Lyra stood tall, no longer burdened by doubt. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was also full of possibility. Together, Kael and Lyra would lead Shadowfang into a new era, one built on love, trust, and strength. And for the first time, Lyra knew that she had a place in this world. A place where she was loved, where she was needed, and where she could finally be the woman she was always meant to be.